insights and tools from their journey that we can apply in our own businesses. Now, we have gone through 2 weeks, and today is the third week where we focused on a range of different themes. We started off this journey by focusing on the theme of knowing and really beginning to unpack what do we need to know about the impact, the regulations, the interventions in the market that are impacting on our business. Then we moved from knowing and began to have a conversation about understanding. And really, there we were seeking to unpack what do we need to understand new, not only in terms of our own business, but also in terms of the clients that we're servicing and the kind of demand in terms of products and services that are coming from this new environment. I'm really, really, really excited that today we're transitioning into a conversation about adjusting, because if there's one thing that is going to hold true is that many of our businesses are going to have to change the strategies that we're taking to market if we're not only going to survive in this time, but we're certainly going to thrive. I'm really excited about our guest today. Her name is Sarah Jane Boden. She goes by SJ. So for the rest of this conversation, I'm going to be talking about SJ. She's the founder and executive director of a creative agency called Soul Providers Collective. She's going to tell us a little bit about the work that they do, but in particular, what we really want to get out of SJ today is what are the adjustments, the big and the small adjustments that she's had to make in her business to make sure that they continue to be successful in these difficult times. Now, one of the things I've said consistently in the last 3 weeks is we're not going to subject you to an hour of being spoken to. We're going to get in conversation with you. And we're going to continue that today. I really, really want you to claim your share of voice in this conversation. So please send me your questions and your comments that you want to pose to SJ in the chat. And I promise I'm going to do the best that I can to integrate your voice in the conversation and get SJ to connect directly with you. I've also made a number of promises in the past couple of weeks. One of those promises being that at the end of every masterclass, we're going to have a spot prize that we're going to give away to those that have been really engaged in terms of the questions that they are asking, the comments, and also how they respond to this question: what is your 2020 2.0? So I'm going to be monitoring my chat line and looking for your comments, your questions, and the response to that question. Now, the promise that I made was that we're going to give away this business hamper that in the form of a spot prize. So I want to put my hand up and say last week, I completely, in my excitement of the conversation, forgot to name and announce our winner. So I hope she's on the masterclass today, but that award goes to, and that prize goes to Nelly Mutswari. Nelly Mutswari, you were fantastic in the last masterclass last week. And we're going to be making sure that your prize gets to you soon. And so today, I'm also going to be looking to give away a spot prize. Last thing before we get into the conversation, if you're going to be on social media, and by the way, we are trending this evening, so let's keep that momentum up. The hashtag that we're going to be using is 2020 2.0. 2020 2.0. SJ is going to be dropping some nuggets of wisdom. So I'm sure that you're going to be putting some of those online in the social media space. So let's get into it. SJ, welcome. What an absolute honor to have this conversation with you.
Hi, Nozipo. Thank you for such a warm welcome. And thank you to Momentum and KayaFM for providing this platform. It's not every day women entrepreneurs get to have a chance to share what we go through, and this is really an amazing opportunity. So thank you very much.
Awesome. So really looking into it, looking forward to it. But let's just start right at the beginning, SJ. I thought it was incredible that you describe yourself
And it turns out a lot of that stuff doesn't really happen. There's a lot of myths And yeah, so the accident part kind of happened very quickly because there was demand for what we were offering, and the demand met the supply. And we just snowballed very, very quickly, thanks to a handful of phenomenal people that believed in me. So it was a bit messy here and there. So yeah, the accident is having to learn how to be an entrepreneur on the go every day.
So I absolutely love that. I mean, you talk about this romanticization that we often go through when we think about entrepreneurship. I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to be in control of my own time. And what I'm hearing you saying is there was a stark difference between finding yourself in this new role and what the world had sold you before. Talk to us a little bit about how did you adjust to that, to this reality that you actually found yourself in compared to what you thought this journey was going to be about?
So I think it's something most entrepreneurs will relate to. I think it's one of the assumptions that we need to kind of bust a bit and make adjustments in. You know, what is an entrepreneur? What does it mean to be an entrepreneur? I remember when we were chatting, I was saying to you, you know, is the lady that's selling dombolo under the tree, is she an entrepreneur? Is a person that owns a spaza shop an entrepreneur? Is a taxi driver an entrepreneur? How do we define entrepreneurship? And I think a lot of us have had this concept of entrepreneurship being very glamorized, and it's been associated with concepts of things like wealth, success, flashy lifestyles, the Instagram life. And when you get into the trenches, it's a very different experience. It's actually an extremely emotional experience. And I don't think people are always upfront about that. So the traditional media positions it as that, as this rock star glamorous thing. But once you're in the trenches, you realize that it ain't about that life.
It ain't about that
Well,
life.
yeah.
And it's so interesting, you know, that you know you have to then adjust to the reality, or potentially then throw your hat into the ring and to say, well, maybe this is not cut out for me. But you stayed, and in addition to staying, you probably have a number of battle scars on your back about some of the challenges, maybe even failures of the early days. And I think there's just so much to learn from those battle scars when we share them with each other. And so I guess the question to you is, if you now just think back to some of the early days, what were some of the biggest challenges that you had to face as an entrepreneur? And what do you think helped you to make that transition and to surpass them?
So I think it's a weird challenge, but it was high growth very quickly. And I'm very grateful for that, because it's not always the case. And I think my timing was right. As I say, there was demand, but it all happened very quickly. And for somebody with no skills, I was challenged every single day. So I think, you know, sometimes I hear people complaining about entrepreneurs and saying, oh, you know, they're so moody, or they're up and down. And I'm like, yeah, because it's hectic, you know. So I struggled with my emotions at certain parts because I was trying to grasp what was going on, but it was moving so fast that it was hard to do at times. We're a services business, which means that we deal with other businesses in a sense, and we help those businesses to communicate in the digital space. So we kind of are the middleman between our clients and the customers. And you know, working in digital content meant that our timing was just brilliant. There was a lot of demand. We needed to move quickly. We needed to learn quickly. And yeah, at some point I did try to leave. So that was a massive fail, by the way. I tried to leave 3 times. And I think, you know, when we look at entrepreneurs, it's not just about being an entrepreneur, it's how is it structured? So in my case, I'm a solo founder. And solo founder, for example, versus partnerships they each have very different challenges. So in my case, I needed to rely quite heavily on my core team that was around me, and growing so quickly and being in that business space, you know, you're dealing with things like procurement, that requires a lot of paperwork. Then you're dealing with long payment cycles,
Yeah.
which affects your cash flow.
Yeah.
So, in the early 2-3 years, I kept moving money between my personal bank account
Sure.
and the business. I never had capital. So capital in my case was me and my savings. I come from a privileged background in many respects, but I'm a daughter of teachers.
Yeah.
So entrepreneurship is not something in our family that someone's handed down to me or taught me about. So yeah, I think learning in the field
Yeah.
is probably was the hard bits up front.
Sure. That's such a rich response. I mean, this idea of actually having to find your ability and your capacity to adjust in the moment and learning in the flow, because you don't have that, the tradition of having a family business handed to you, as an example. I do want to get to some of the comments that have already come through. So firstly, I'm really happy to see that Nelly is on, and she has said a very big thank you for her prize from last week. And Llewellyn says, SJ, I really identify with you. Life as an entrepreneur is a roller coaster ride of emotions as a result of ups and downs, challenges, wins and losses. And I really love, the fact that in this conversation today, we're almost going beneath the surface of the practical things that we see in business, and also touching on some of the underlying emotional and psychological issues early on in the conversation that are coming to the surface. I don't know, maybe it's because we've got a woman guest, but I'm really, really grateful for it. Nelly's also just coming in again and saying, SJ, an entrepreneur, is someone who's not afraid to dream, and someone who's always taking legit risks. So that's interesting that there's risk and there's legitimate risk, which is qualified or validated risk. So lots of comments already coming through. I also want to say we are on a record 110 people on the masterclass this evening. So a really, really good audience that we've got going. I want to change gears just a little bit, SJ, because one of the things that I admire most about you is also been what you refer to you as your why and your purpose work. And we see this expressed in the kind of things that you pursue academically as well. Your big interest in critical diversity and equality. Let's talk a little bit about that. Why is this your purpose and your why, and how does it find expression in your work?
Sure. So I actually grew up both in South Africa and Eswatini, Swaziland at the time. So I had a different exposure to a lot of my peers in South Africa in terms of race, for example. And so, it's had a massive impact on who I am as a human. And having grown up in that situation in Swaziland at the time, Eswatini, I was a bit confused in South Africa by the way things were going. Our industry, we fall under advertising communications, has been particularly slow at transformation. And it's always been quite a male-dominated industry. I mean, I only know about 2 other women owners of agencies of our size in the country. And solo ones are very, very rare. So, we're talking about gender, we're talking about race, we're talking about class, we're talking about, able-bodiedness, etc., sexuality. The norm and the status quo in business is a white guy often, and we need to work at, how do we broaden that idea of business and entrepreneurship? How do we shatter all these status quo concepts that have us kind of imagining an entrepreneur in a certain way, where actually we're highly diverse and we come from all kinds of different backgrounds. So that's my passion. I've been quite dedicated to it for the last 3 years, really trying to learn and unlearn and practice a different way of doing business. So yeah, that's where it comes in. And then I decided I better go get the papers, because sometimes as a woman in business or just in general, you're not always, there can be credibility issues. So I needed some papers to say, actually, here I have gone, I've taken the time, I'm upskilling myself, I'm learning, and I can talk to the issue from a professional and a skilled background.
I absolutely love that. I mean, it reminds me of a saying, and I am going to quote Beyonce, so the world will forgive me. She always talks about make sure that you're able to back it up. And I think that's just the importance of feeling that passion and that why, but going out to do the work, both in terms of self, but also doing the work academically, so you're bringing that credibility into your space. But I guess where I'm trying to go with this is also to understand, SJ, how you as a woman have adjusted to the environment that you find yourself in. And the truth of the matter is the business environment, for most intents and purposes, is structured around a male archetype. And so the question to you is, what adjustments did you have to make as a woman in business?
It's a great question. So I think so in my studies, my area of interest is entrepreneurship and looking at it from a critical point of view. And what a lot of theorists are saying, and it's a very edgy topic because, entrepreneurship has been accepted to be, a certain form for a long time. And now people are starting to ask questions about it. It's a very masculinized subject. And actually, women do business very differently to men. And I did a poll with I have a movement called Founder Nation, which is a movement of women entrepreneurs and women in business. I did a poll in the last few days to ask how everybody's doing in COVID, and I was really surprised. 95% of the women had no impact on their business. And I think maybe that's because we perceive business slightly differently to men, and I think we operate differently. And I mean, we're generalizing here, but for the purposes of time, etc. So for instance, I've tried to grow a very inclusive model of business, where I've always tried to share as much as I can with my core team and with the team that I operate with. Over the years, I've had to unlearn some of my old school training, and we've become a very nurturing environment where we've become very human-centric and put our team in the middle. And centering your team is not always the goal for the typical entrepreneur. I think also, in fact, today there was someone on LinkedIn who was talking to me and saying, we deal with growth entrepreneurs, let's take your business to 100 million. And to be honest with you, I'm not in it for that. I think we perceive growth differently. So what does growth mean to us? So I've had to adjust. I've had to actually adjust in a way. I've had to become comfortable with who I am and how I operate in my business and how I believe business should operate. And in many ways, I've had to kind of just forget about the norm and forget about the way other people are doing things, because otherwise I think I would get lost and I would get confused. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, and I think just trying to create these networks of women so we can learn from each other and share from each other. I tend to have quite an abundant mentality as well. So yeah, I don't know if those are feminine traits, but it's definitely different.
No, it's definitely different. And if you haven't heard of it, I would, to all of those who are on the masterclass tonight, go and look up the Athena Doctrine, which is a beautiful study about how women in business show up differently to men. I do want us to transition into the impact of COVID in your business, but I want to acknowledge that there's been so many comments on, thank you so much for speaking about the solo founder, and in particular, the unique challenges to being a solo founder. And one of the questions that I would like you to address just very quickly, if you will, SJ, from Catherine, she says, as a solo founder, how do you know when to take on staff or not? And do you make use of the gig economy or not? And I think it's a brilliant question because it's very practical, it's very functional. And then I want to transition us into the impact of COVID.
Sorry, can you just repeat that question? I missed it.
So how do you know when to take on staff, especially when you're a solo founder?
Whew. So, so now we have to go back to 2011, which is when I started. And I started in my flat. And then, I would use the we. Here we are very, very much looking forward to meeting with you. The model I used to grow my team up front, which to be honest caused a few eye rolls by like accounting type of people, I would only hire when I had a contract in place. And I
Mm,
used to do all the sums in my head. But now remember, our model then was very much a retainer based model, which is kind of the dream model, but it's becoming extremely extinct.
yeah,
So when we get to how things have shifted,
yeah,
I'll talk to that. But
love.
back then in 2011, in the advertising and marketing industry, retainers were the norm. And so you would be able to book, like get a 6 month, 12 month, even 2 year retainer with the client.
Yeah.
So when you have that guarantee of income, I would then do the sums on paper and in my head, and I'd go, okay, cool. I can afford that person. Right, let's hire. I actually had someone in my business who I planned 6 months and worked 6 months to afford. So sometimes I would look for talent and go, I really need that person in my team. I'm going to find a project and
Yes.
then hire them. So I've been very risk averse. Unfortunately, as the years went by, and I think this is when we talk about assumptions and adjustments. One of the things that when we get to COVID, one of the things that's really hit people is that a lot of us, once you get into that rhythm, you tend to assume that this is it. We
Yeah.
can just keep going, we can keep growing, we can keep doing the same thing, and then suddenly something can come along and just chop it all off.
I think that's
So,
a beautiful
yeah.
place to pause it. Something can come along and just chop it all off, because that's the equivalent of COVID, right? So let me transition. And as I transition, there's a beautiful comment from Tracy. She says, "Oh my gosh, SJ, you are so human centric." All right. So such a beautiful kudos back to you. So let's transition to COVID, and I want to take us all back to March 26th, right, when we saw all the restrictions and the lockdown being instituted. And really, the question to you, SJ, is that firstly, at an industry level, what were the big observations you had in terms of the changes that required adjustment? But before you answer, I'm really keen to get the voice of all our guests, all 110 of our guests who have joined us tonight. So I'm going to launch a poll. And I'm going to ask you all to please respond to the poll. So if we could please launch that poll. It's the second poll. So let's see if that comes up. Perfect. And here's the question. The question is there and it says, how much has your business had to adjust as a result of COVID-19? Is it that you've had to completely rethink your entire business strategy? Or is it that you've had to apply minor amendments to your business strategy, but the overall strategy has remained the same? Or has COVID completely disrupted your business strategy, but has provided bigger and better opportunities? Or are you in the quartile of people who are saying, I'm absolutely stuck, I don't know what to do, I need help? Now, what I can see on my end is that we've got about 40 people or so who have voted. So let's go quick fingers. Put your options in there. And it's interesting right now is that what I'm seeing is 42% are saying that you've actually had to make minor amendments to your business strategy, but the overall strategy has remained the same. So I'm going to give it another 10 seconds. I'm going to be generous because I can see there are some fast fingers moving along. And I'm going to now call on that. We can close the poll at this stage. So I'm going to end the poll. And there we go. And I'm going to speak to the results for you in a second. So here we go. 44%, by far the highest this evening. You've said you've had to make minor amendments to your business strategy, but the overall strategy has remained the same. The interesting thing here, of course, is that only 13% of you feel that you're completely stuck and you have no sense of what to do. I think it's such a beautiful way to segue and transition to you, SJ, because it raises the question then to say, we are seeing people making adjustments in their strategy. If you look at what's happened in the industry, the creative industry, what are the big adjustments that the industry had to make?
So, this is my own personal point of view. The way our industry is structured is it's actually got quite a big global structure. And that global structure consists of several massive holding companies. Now, a lot of those holding companies went on big acquisition, merger and acquisition drives about 10, 15 years ago. In fact, when we were starting out, and they came into South Africa and they bought lots and lots and lots of small agencies my size. And what we're seeing is that those massive global groups have, for a while now, I'd probably say 2-3 years, have been struggling to keep that retainer model, which, you know, they would get massive retainers, to keep that kind of retainer model going. So the truth, in my opinion, is that our agency industry has been getting disrupted for a while. We had, you know, COVID is almost the sting in the tail. But I would say that for the last 2-3 years, there's been a huge decline in marketing budgets. You know, when the economy shrinks, often corporates, etc., they've got a choice. I remember my friend telling me it's CSI or marketing, you know, and what are we going to do? So, you know, sometimes with CSI being tied into triple BEE scorecards, etc., it's marketing that gets squeezed, and all the marketers here from Momentum will be nodding, I'm sure. So to be honest with you, our industry has been shrinking. When we started our content agency in 2011, there were hardly any other agencies, but it's been a bit like the event industry, where over the last 10 years, you've had massive newcomers coming in. Now, you know, people are running agencies from their lounges. I mean, not just because it's COVID, but, you know, there's huge supply. So to be honest with you, COVID did disrupt stuff. And what that looked like was massive retrenchments, massive closure of smaller agencies like our size, lots of agencies just having to make decisions on rentals and things like that, your overheads, you know. So yeah, and a complete pause on acquisitions and mergers. So it's been a rough time for the marketing and advertising industry. I personally know a lot of people who were retrenched already a year ago. So, you know, it's been a long tail and now the sting is here.
Yeah, and I mean, that's such a beautiful way of capturing the big trends that we're seeing in the market. So, you know, from the fall of the marketing budgets to the death of the retainer model to the massive retrenchments, and also the dwindling down of merger and acquisition activity. And I suppose what I want us to do is, Jay, is to funnel into your business now and move from the big industry lens and maybe get you to talk to us about almost the operating adjustments you had to make for Sole Providers Collective and the day-to-day adjustments you and your team had to make as of the 26th of March, 2020.
Great. So I'm just going to give you a quick history, and I mentioned this already to you off air. So when we say something can come along and completely mess up your model, which often is a great thing because you have to rethink and re-energize and reimagine, that happened to us late 2018. It started happening and we started to see it happening. So we started to implement what a lot of people have done now in the last 3 months, which is that we immediately dropped all salaries, for instance, and all high earners needed to come right down. And we'd been on a great ride for ages. But, you know, I think that's one of the things that happens. You just think it's going to keep going. And then one day, it's over. So we saw that coming. Then we had a massive client loss in January last year. And one of the mistakes we can make as entrepreneurs is being over-reliant on one big client. And it's like such an obvious thing, but we do it again and again and again. Why? Because those clients come along, retainers are rare, you jump on them, and sometimes you neglect your other clients. Anyway, long story, but so we actually had our tough moment in February last year. And I was devastated because my purpose, one of the ways my purpose comes to life is I believe in job creation. And I'm very passionate about inequality. And we are operating against this extreme inequality in South Africa. So whenever we can create jobs, we will. And often we've tried to get kids that are straight out of college or varsity into our business, and we're kind of like a talent incubator. So it was heartbreaking to know that, and you feel so guilty as the entrepreneur, you know, you feel like I've done this. my lack of foresight, my lack of understanding, my lack of experience has brought us to this place. I promise you, it was one of the darkest times ever in my entrepreneurial journey. So we ended up having to do a restructure, and we actually only retrenched 2 people. But then, you get these stories that create stories in business are very interesting. Sole providers are in trouble. Are our jobs secure? And actually, we had a few people exit the business. And in some ways, that helped us because it meant we now had a tighter team. And we were able to restructure how we employed people and now we no longer have retainers. We looked at moving into, I call it the brick model, which is a whole, if you think of a wall, lots of projects where they all start overlapping and then it starts to feel like a retainer. So all that stuff happened last year. When we got to January this year, oh, by the way, it took us 2 months and we were recovering already. And in fact, my core team all got 13th checks in December. So we made a quick recovery because we got really creative about how to solve it. And one of the things we did, which had mixed results, was we asked the team to go to a 4-day week salary cut. Some people were asked to only work 4 days and others were kept on 5 days and asked to help us walk the journey and carry the load. And it had very mixed results, very interesting conversation for another time. But then when we got to January this year, I said, right, guys, let's implement the 4-day week as a new way of working. So that was already in place. When COVID hit, our team was so well prepared being in digital. We actually went digital 2 weeks before the lockdown. And, I'm a bit paranoid. And my message to the team was our goal is to get through this next few months without one of us getting coronavirus, and without one of us, because my team come from all over Joburg. They live in all different types of situations, all different backgrounds, economic backgrounds. And so we quickly moved to try and help people work from their homes. Sometimes people didn't have privacy in their homes. How did we help them, achieve that? Desks, chairs. We got lots of new SIM cards. We moved very quickly. But what we found within the first few weeks was that there was a huge rise in exhaustion and fatigue. So I decided, and I love coming up with ideas like this, I decided to implement a siesta, which I think we should implement on a national level. So basically what we did was we made from 12 to 2 every day, a time when no meetings could be booked. Okay, there's some clients who still book meetings in that slot. We have asked them nicely, but needs must. And so from Monday to Friday, we have this 2-hour slot where you don't have to be in front of your screen, because that whole day in front of your screen and calls, actually our business has grown during this period.
So let me jump in for a second there, Esha. I mean, you are literally just sharing so much insight. One could just sit and listen to you and not jump into the conversation. But I think you've said so much that I think we just need to raise a few of these things. The first of these is what I'm hearing is that we need to be alive as entrepreneurs to opportunities for adjustment, whether we're in a crisis or not. And from your own journey, you're saying, even before lockdown and restrictions, we listened to what the market was telling us in terms of the changes that were being required. We made the necessary and sometimes painful adjustments, and that actually stood us in good stead, so that when COVID hit, we're actually slightly ahead of the curve. And so even this idea of having a 4-day week wasn't such a big shock to your team, because you're actually constantly listening to what the environment is telling you. So for us entrepreneurs listening, it's really about, is your ear close enough to hear what the market is telling you? I mean, there's been a lot of response to this idea of you supporting your team to work from home. Ratiba says, oh, wow, I love the way she really helps the team to be comfortable in their space and to be able to work from home. And really, really lots of comments in that space. I do want to, I want to comment on the siesta, right? Which is really fantastic because, I mean, we talk about human-centered organizations and
Yeah.
human-centered leadership and so on, but it's often difficult to prioritize that when the focus of the business is on survival. And such a beautiful exception to the stories we've been hearing where you've said, no, we've actually done this. So I want to bring in a couple of more voices here. And so Renata says, kudos, SJ, such forward thinking, 4-day week, siestas, boom, and your business has growth. I think that one is going to be fed back into a lot of business environments tomorrow. And then I love this question. I mean, we'll get to it as well, which says, you know, Llewellyn coming, oh, it's just so Llewellyn coming in and bringing in the fact that, you know, the siesta is such a normal part of Spanish lifestyle, right? In fact, the entire country goes into a siesta. And he says, you know, Llewellyn says the siesta is a major part of the normal business practice in countries like Spain, but then to compensate for the productivity loss, they work later in the evening. And so it's just interesting ways in which we get an opportunity to adjust what we always believed needed to be true. Now, I want us to move on in the conversation because there's so much we still need to get through. So you've spoken to us about almost the day-to-day adjustments that you had to make within your business. I want to talk a little bit about how, looking at the landscape in terms of, you know, how you're servicing your clients, in particular, if you look at consumers who themselves are adjusting how they consume content and how they engage with brands. How did you have to adjust to your clients' new environment and consumers' emerging consumption trends that were different from what we've known 3 months ago?
So one of our values in the business is being proactive. And I think we have such great relationships with our clients. And we have some really like future-minded clients who all they need is for us to work with them and to help them bring their ideas to life. The majority of our clients really moved so quickly. They were so impressive. They started reinventing, innovating, changing their products. What we needed to do, for instance, is, so we run content calendars, right? And those calendars would normally be done a month in advance, at least. That all needed to change because you didn't know what was happening tomorrow or what rule was coming the next day. So one of our biggest clients, we run about 12, 13 brands with them. We actually had to restructure our entire content process with them. And we started working week to week. So we would only put out a week's worth of work and then get that approved and get that out. But I know there were even instances where we had to bring something back down because that had changed. So in those first heady, crazy days of lockdown, we had to be extremely quick thinking and proactive. And I'm very grateful to my account management team who are the best. And thanks, guys. And our clients who trusted us to come up with great ideas and to talk to the market and to help the conversations with the market.
I love Mpho's question. So Mpho's like, hold on, surely there must have been some clients maybe that dropped you, that you lost as a result of this. And so Mpho's saying, what's your strategy, SJ? How do you retain the clients that you do have? And what is the strategy that you take to market to get more clients in through the door?
So touch wood, and I know some of my clients are watching. No, we've gained clients. We have gained a couple of clients during this time, which is quite interesting. Mpho, to answer your question, when we noticed the economy shrinking in 2017, we implemented a sales pipeline process for our business. We call it the Connect process. And you can send me some DMs. Maybe we'll share some of the secrets in that IP that we've created. But it became a sustained focus for us. And we hadn't had that in our business before. We were used to referrals, word of mouth. And suddenly we saw our billing starting to get shaky. And I remember saying to the team, we're going into decline. And some of the team were like, please. But we introduced that program then. What was quite interesting was we would often get a call and that would translate into a project within 2-3 weeks.
Sure.
Wow. So this process where we met every week and we worked on our pipeline revealed that timing over the last 3 years stretched out to, in some cases, 18 months. So 18 months from a brief to bringing it to life. So during that time, we didn't stop. We just kept going consistently, chasing leads, growing our business, having conversations. And yeah, it's incredible. We're still turning things around. Like today, we had that meeting, and there's some leads today that came in yesterday from a conversation a year ago. So it's a constant, consistent focus on pipeline that is required.
Yeah. So it almost feeds into this idea that, the relationship aspects of not only your existing clients, but potential clients is so important. Just because somebody turns you down today doesn't mean that relationship has gone completely cold. Mm-hmm. They might just not be ready at that particular moment to make use of your product and your service. And so you continue journeying with them till they come to a point where there is an opportunity for them to connect. So I want to tap into your storytelling, because again, this is something that Soul Providers Collective does really, really well. Have you found that you've had to tell different stories because of COVID-19? Do you get a sense that the market and the consumer is looking for a different story than what we were used to before?
Absolutely. And again, this has been a gradual shift for us. It's not overnight. Our team are some of the smartest young creatives I know. And we realized amongst ourselves that there were other kinds of work we wanted to work on besides the commercial, straight retail work. So we started talking to issues like inequality, for instance, already about a year ago. So what we found now is that the last few weeks, months, we've been getting involved in these incredible projects in diversity, in equality, in governance, in all these kind of intellectual minded spaces. So your writer, who's used to shooting out 10 lines of copy, is now writing a thought piece that's being published in the Daily Maverick with your client as a partner. So you mentioned that's been another shift, moving away from a supplier relationship, supplier client, into a collaboration, co-creation, partnership. That's been a massive shift for us during this lockdown.
Sure. So lovely. I want us to start transitioning to 2020 2.0 in the sense of framing the conversation post-pandemic. But before I do that, there's a question that's popped up, and I can see other people are commenting on it, and they're saying, great question, anonymous. So there's an anonymous attendee who's asked a question, which I actually think is important. And the question is this, SJ: how do you deal with a disgruntled employee in a small agency? And I guess the question is important because as small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, the mere size of our businesses means that if there is some degree of disgruntlement in the team, it filters through so much more faster than if you're in a big multinational business with hundreds and thousands of people. What's your strategy as a leader to manage conflict in these times? And given the COVID environment, we would imagine there's a lot of disgruntled people who have had to make adjustments that they might not have been ready for.
Sure, anonymous, that's a big one. So, to be honest with you, I think disgruntled employees, retrenchment, employees that don't work out are part and parcel of business. Mm-hmm. And I think in the early years when I was more inexperienced, I used to beat myself up about that stuff. I would blame myself, I was highly self-critical, but actually that's the way business as it exists in this format right now, as we know it, that's how it's structured. And you've got certain values and ethos in your business. And, we have a very, my HR person, Appy, has a very complex hiring process, but you're not always going to get it right. And so I've had to accept that I'm not going to be liked by everybody. And that in my business, there are going to be times where we've hired somebody who doesn't fit our culture. And we have a very high performing culture. It's very the stakes are high. The talent in our business is hot. So sometimes people come in and they can't even cope with the pressure, with, the talent. And so we always try to do a decent breakup. And for me, that's really important. If things don't work out, pay someone a little extra, help the exit be, with dignity where you can. Say goodbye properly. Don't burn bridges. That's just very short-sighted behavior. So, we've just tried to do things as well as possible. We have definitely messed up, and every entrepreneur will mess up. So don't beat yourself up. Just keep doing your best.
Okay, so I've got an amazing message here that I'm so excited about. The message is we've got 10 extra minutes because this conversation is so hot. So Nozi and Sarah, please keep going. So thank you, Momentum team. I'm going to keep this going because you are dropping so much knowledge here. Now, here's something that you've said, and I really want us to hear this. Because oftentimes when we talk about burning bridges, we always think about it from the perspective of the employee not having to burn bridges. But as the employer, what I'm hearing you saying is that even if you're the employer, don't burn bridges with your employees because you don't know where they're going from where the next, who knows, they could be sitting on the other side of a pitch that you're making for a particular piece of work. So some valuable advice coming through there. Okay, now I've got my chat line going really, really crazy at the moment. SPCMA06, it sounds like a number plate, but I'm sure it isn't, it's a person, says, SJ is an absolute visionary. I'm so proud to be a part of this webinar. Lovely. Now, let's transition a little bit. I want us to change gears a little bit. I want us to start thinking post-pandemic world, post-COVID-19. When we started this conversation, we said 2020 is not cancelled. So we know there's this stuff that still needs to be done. I want to start off with where you've led us, SJ. You've led us into quite a human-centered, emotional, and to some extent psychological lens on leadership as an entrepreneur. I want to know, what have you had to learn as a leader, learn and unlearn, if you will, as you've adjusted through this environment? And what's perhaps been the biggest lesson about yourself that you have learned out of this last 3 months that we've been in?
Sure. So I think I've learned to be extremely grateful and grateful for the team that I have, because it has been the most incredible collaboration with them. I'm also extremely grateful for clients. We expected our clients to slash things, to pull back, and they stayed with us. And in many ways, I think that they recognized that we're an SME. And gratitude has honestly been one of the biggest things. I think our journey is a constant journey of unlearning and relearning. And especially if you haven't been trained, or if you haven't been educated, or you don't have an MBA, or it's your first business, you're going to make mistakes. And I've made many, many mistakes. But I think what I've learned is to bounce back quickly. So Corona has helped me to trust more, because now I can't see anybody. But I've always pulled back a bit anyway. I'm not that leader that's over your shoulder. So just trusting that people getting on with stuff. Like I said, we changed the way we worked from being an hourly based, like deliverables kind of method, into, we called it outcomes based. Here's your day, here's your thing, however you work it. If it's early morning, late at night, through your siesta, just get the work done to the best ability that you can. So I had to adjust in that sense, to just trust people, to just get the work done, which I have done for a while. Sure. Those are just two of the things: gratitude and trust.
Gratitude and trust. And of course, when we talk about gratitude, there's an implied humility there, right? That a lot of what you have is outside of your own capability and your own expertise, and that's why we're grateful for it. So love that, and trust, and we know where trust has been broken or eroded, that it's just so difficult to actually get work done in those spaces. So trust that people want the best for the business and they will do their part. But let's stay a little bit on this idea of mindset, and in particular, how do we reframe crisis, risk, threat, and see opportunity instead? And maybe, SJ, it's less about you, but in this question, and I want to know, how do you get your team especially when everybody's feeling so uncertain and so overwhelmed, how did you get your team to shift their mindset to look at COVID-19 as an absolute opportunity, especially to leverage some of the ahead of the curve things that you guys had already been doing?
So, yeah, I think those conversations were going already. So I
Mm,
think it was just a question of doubling down on it
yeah.
and bringing people along, and creating this safe space for us to all be more experimental, for us to all reimagine our business. I might come with the business strategy at the beginning of COVID, but my team are the ones who bring in that nuance and the finesse and the ideas. We have a team of 6, 7, 8 leaders in our business. And to answer the diversity question, absolutely. Majority of our leadership team are actually Black females. I think we sit on about 85% women in our business. And I've tried to make it demographically reflect the country as much as possible. But back to your question, I think it's just creating a safe space for people to talk to you, for people to open up if they're struggling, for the team. Then, we put in these 9 o'clock every morning stand-up sessions. If someone was struggling, I'm literally, this last week I was doing 3 people's jobs. It's just much more frequent communication in some ways. But that might be WhatsApp, GChat, email. Getting the FaceTime is quite hard, and we're missing each other a lot, by the way. But yeah, I think just creating a safe space for the team to feel comfortable to bring you their problems, to come and tell you what's happening in their home, because now they're at home, and there's a whole lot of stuff going on at home. So how do we help support people? One of the things we did was we implemented a Corona bonus. So halfway through the month, we just gave people a little bump, a little gift. And we've done that for 3 months, just to help people with those bills that we're having to pay. Oh, and we introduced medical insurance in April. So anybody who didn't have medical insurance immediately went onto that program. So just creating that safe space where people can park all their anxiety and just do their best work, which they love doing.
So SJ, I worry that you might have unleashed a Pandora's box on the country, Corona bonus, right? So I think tomorrow morning we're going to wake up to a hashtag Corona bonuses must rise, because everybody is looking for. But it's beautiful to sort of, hear some of this absolutely non-traditional, innovative thinking going against the trend and the curve, where a lot of businesses have responded by saying, how do we become stingy with resources? How do we cap any operating expenditure so that we can retain cash within the business? And what I'm hearing you saying is asking a completely different question, which is, how do we show up for the people who are part of Sole Providers Collective, and what's meaningful for them then? Now, a couple of things that I want to get to. Ratibe, I think your question's been answered. Is SJ pro women in her business? I think she said 85% of the business is women. That is as high as I have heard in all of my engagements with entrepreneurs. And then lots of kudos to you, SJ, in terms of saying you're a fantastic leader, and keep going. I've got a question here that says, what value do you think having an 85% female managed agency brings? Nozipo, you mentioned the Athena doctrine. And again, it's a fantastic way of us just wrapping up on Ratibe's question, because I want to get to your 2020 2.0. But, the Athena doctrine, high level, is basically this study that was done with 65,000 people around the world, and the question was, what kind of leadership traits is the world looking for? And 65,000 people listed leadership traits that are often associated with women: empathy, openness, communication. And so what the Athena doctrine says is that the world would be a better place if more people led from a place of feminine leadership traits. And I guess a quick comment from you, SJ, on that is to say, is there value? Is there a premium? Is there a benefit to having 85% of your staff being women?
So, coming back to the earlier part of the conversation, women women tend to see growth differently. So for instance, my team, we're not in January, the strategy wasn't let's double our income, triple our profit, let's go do the deals with the Oaks on the golf course. Our strategy was how can we get more time to just chill a bit. Our strategy was growth is growth in the individual. Growth is growth in all of our unlearning and relearning. So that feminine touch in the business, it's just always been there since day one. If you ask any ex-staff member who we call our ancestors, if you ask them, they'll tell you it's always been like that from day one. And I think in a way, it is how we can make the change happen in diversity. So you can talk about diversity till you're blue in the face, but unless you implement the action on the ground, we're never going to get there. So that's where my kind of advocacy in terms of gender and race comes in, where I'm saying, if that's what I believe, I need to do it. And I need to do it properly and with respect and in the best way possible. A few mistakes along the way again, but just keep going, keep trying.
Lovely. Keep going, keep trying, keep showing up, keep being a woman for women in the space. Now, SJ, when we started this conversation, we spoke about your having to confront reality of what it really meant to be an entrepreneur, which is quite different from sort of the romanticized version that we know is often punted out there. I want us to go back to a definitional case as we begin to wrap, which is, what is your definition of success now? Especially having, gone through COVID, we're in the midst of COVID. We know that the worst is yet to come if we're listening to all the reports. Has this shifted your definition of and your understanding of what it means to be a successful entrepreneur?
Yes, and I've got to come back again to context, Nozipho. If COVID did anything, it was to reveal how unequal our society is. And, when you look at the numbers, we're talking about a middle class of, estimates go from 20 to 30%. That's like this many people, and we're sitting with this country with this many people with so much talent and so much potential. So for me, it's really important that we look at business differently. Yeah. And I'm hoping to try and solve some of these questions with my thesis. But I believe business in South Africa today and every day from now onwards needs to look at how am I going to help to solve the social economic problems of our country. And if you can come up with business models and solutions that can work in that space, you got a business to go. If you're still focusing on shareholders and profit and how to extract, as much money as possible and time from people, etc., you're going to struggle, because the world is evolving and it's time for us to all get our hands dirty and fix our country.
Sure. So what I'm hearing you saying is, if you haven't adjusted to the new normal, if you haven't adjusted to human-centered leadership, if you haven't adjusted to what the world is calling for, which is just business and just practices, you're actually going to find yourself in really, really big trouble. And it's not CSI. It's actually the stuff that sits at the core of your business and your strategy. So here's the final question that I want to bring to you, SJ. Yes. Having heard you talking about, where you see the new definition of success going, what's your 2020 2.0? As you think about the rest of this year, what are some of the things that you still want to get done for yourself and your team that is definitely going to be a part of you reclaiming what's still left of the year?
So I actually wrote a little list.
Oh.
So, my personal goal is empowerment in my team, and it's also part of my philosophy. So I would really love at the end of this year to have a team that feels empowered and engaged. And I hope that working together through this extremely challenging time makes us work together even better and even in a more fluid way. My second thing is that every year I take the team away on a trip. So in the good years, we went to Mozambique twice, Swaziland, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania. We even went to Portugal.
Ooh.
And then straight after that, 2018, when we felt that decline, we went to Paris, which I announced as Paris. Paris with a Y.
Yeah.
And then last year things started getting better, so we went to Bujibalito. But the goal of those trips are to go and be immersed in a Pan-African context and to understand that how we live and how we are here in South Africa is but one experience of a massive continent. So my dream is to be able to take the team to a phenomenal destination, again, bigger than Paris. My third one is to see our clients successful and thriving, because we work with a number of corporates, and that's where a lot of job creation sits. So to see my clients really hitting all their goals, big challenge. And then to end off on a solid year. And I use the word solid, which for me means, even if it's breaking even, but having had a phenomenal year as a team together. And then I would love to make up this stressful time with some big downtime. So we're already talking about, can we try and have a 4-week close, December, Jan, so people can get the rest they're going to need after this. And yeah, lastly, I think just to get more and more work that we love doing in that diversity space, in that inclusion space, in those hard conversations, and with brands that we love working with. So yeah, those are my goals.
Oh my, this is a fantastic 6-point list of SMEs 2022. I suspect that you might have quite a number of CVs in your inbox, maybe tomorrow on your website. So a team that is empowered and engaged, a trip somewhere, a destination outside of South Africa, fabulous. Clients that are successful, solid performance from the business, downtime, and of course an opportunity to do the work that we love. SJ, what an absolute honor. I do want to read you a couple of the comments. Well done, SJ. We love your work. Well done, SJ. You are so empowering. Hey, SJ, you're so authentic and inspiring. SJ, it's sticky here, and I know you're talking about creating shared value. That is the new model. And I think my two last favorite comments, Cabello says, louder for the people at the back. So we're putting a loud hailer for the people at the back. And Renata taking us home with absolute goosebumps. Absolute goosebumps. Wow. Renata, I couldn't agree more. Now, this is what we're going to do in the last few minutes. We're going to share with you an amazing video now that we're going to play. And when we come back, I'm not going to forget this time, I'm going to be announcing our spot prize winner for today. I've been monitoring that chat. So I'll be back in 2 minutes.
See you, Nana.
We're going to love each other much more. I'm going to give these guys my support.
I'm going to be so loud. The whole world's going to hear. I'm not going to worry about how many likes I get. And just like myself.
I'm going to give nature a big hug.
Scared anymore.
I'm gonna help give him the world he deserves.
I want him to be with his friends.
There we go. I hope you can hear me now. We're absolutely back. and we've been having huge deliberations in the background about our spot prize winner for this evening. And I have confirmation that I was right about the person that I was thinking. So drum roll, wherever you are, Llewellyn Oliver, you were absolutely outstanding in terms of your questions, your comments, your contribution to this conversation. So your spot prize is making itself over to you. And that means, guys, we've only got one more week left. Now, remember that if you are part of the pool of people that have journeyed with us for the entire 4 weeks, like Frank Guenya, who I saw was back on again today, you stand the chance of getting a business coach as well as being profiled in the ecosystem of Kaya platforms, including KayaFM, Kaya TV. So I'm really, really hoping to see a lot of you back again with us next week as we focus on the theme of doing. So we've gone from knowing to understanding. SJ has been phenomenal in getting us to adjusting. And next week, we turn our focus to doing. Remember, as always, we always promise you that we send you the link to your email address of this conversation after this particular event, so that you can really sit with some of the insights and the nuggets that were shared today. So that's going to be making its way to you as well. And I think I have covered everything. Safe to say a big, big thank you to SJ Boden. Thank you so much for just being an incredible guest, for giving so much of yourself in the conversation. We absolutely enjoyed you.